This time I want to start by talking a little about my work process for work. Early on, I drafted a list of commandments to guide my exploration, some of which I can't mention because it would reveal certain secrets that permeate the world of Kurin. What I can say is that this list has been expanding. One of these commandments, for example, is there is at least one truth in every version of a story. Another, and this brings us to the topic of this episode, is make the familiar alien. Which means that since Kurin is a distant planet, its inhabitants and culture, its creatures, and also many familiar geographical features must have a strange twist. Alien is the word I really want to use. We'll see if I'm up to the challenge. Having thus explored, at least superficially, the 7 tribes of Kurin, it is time to discuss what this ringed world is like. To do this, I will explain 3 main aspects that will help form an idea of the setting: alien geography and ecology, the war of fire, and signs of calamity. Following the idea of making the familiar alien, the inhabitants of Kurin have names for everything around them, and most will be familiar to Earthlings. However, it often happens that these names don't accurately describe the things we know. To give some examples, on Damri grow gigantic gnarled oaks that the Drunid worship for their fruit and musky sap. And on Earth we have oaks, splendid trees coveted for their wood and of great cultural significance to ancient peoples. But on Kurin these are, well, you can imagine. Continuing with the biosphere, lions are predators admired and feared by humans, both on Earth and on the ringed world. But on the latter, they also belong to a section we might call speculative biology. That's not all. The planet features geological formations that defy common sense, but which, while impressive, are not impossible for the Olumi and Ishudi. These are the spiralons. The Earth on Worn is strangely more malleable than that of other planets, and some parts of the substrate contract and twist into spirals, which the Eastern tribes consider sacred. On Earth, there are all sorts of incredible formations, like the basalt pillars of Iceland, and on Worn, especially in the east, enormous rock pillars and natural monoliths dot the landscape, telling the story of the world's birth. Along these lines, there is one final element we cannot overlook. Kurin is a ringed planet with a fractured moon. Kurin's second moon is much farther away, still held by the planet's gravitational field, and appears smaller in the sky. The seasons are more extreme than on Earth, because the 2 larger rings reflect more sunlight, and the planet's surface is riddled with craters, some small, others enormous. The oldest, a testament to the power of the heavens, and an era of cosmic violence. Occasionally, a stony visitor tears itself from the sky to slam into Kurin's crust, an event that always puts the tribes on high alert and on the move. Sometimes what seems like divine punishment can be a gift. I like to read about the history of fantasy and science fiction, to go to the sources, so to speak. Thus, the strange creatures of Sean Carter of Mars, which inspired the fauna of Star Wars and other adventures of the pulp era, are also an inspiration for the animals of Kurin, while the landscapes of Darwin IV of Expedition and Scavenger Reign, influenced by the work of Moebius, with their extraterrestrial landscapes, are a beacon that guides my search. The War of Fire, also called the Great War by the Western tribes, was the conflict that ended with the final fall of the White Empire, but its events had been planted centuries earlier when the mages of Kudamar discovered that matter was composed of smaller units. The greedy sorcerers then wondered if these smaller structures could also be separated, broken apart, and thus the Order of the Flame was born. The Taolin wanted to use these mages as weapons of war, but it was too late. Many hid from the eyes of their pursuers, and in the shadows forged alliances with other powers on the continent, who gladly accepted their services. During the Great War, the power discovered by this order was finally unleashed. In this way, many cities were wiped off the map, and entire regions remained uninhabitable, the result of the evils born of fire and the countless new conflicts sparked by the brutality of the past years. War and calamity. Often the threat of environmental collapse are events that drive the plots of countless fantasy stories. A Song of Ice and Fire is imbued with a sense of doom at the arrival of winter and its horrors. Athas, from Dungeons and Dragons, is also a world slowly dying. Conflict and catastrophe are terrible events, but fascinating. Mages and red priests sense it in their respective domains. Things are not as they were. Beasts invade once calm regions in Tengethar and Orun. Trembling mirages disturb travelers' paths in Damri and Ulman. Deep within the mountains, a low rumble sounds like a landslide at the bottom of the sea. Even the sky is not the same. Travelers point to new lights born in the firmament, only to vanish the following night. The sky deceives, the earth bleeds, and the small human creature, devastated after a century of war, try to make sense of their existence on a planet that, moreover, had never been docile to their ancestors. Kurin speaks in a language that only a few can decipher.